So I can go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's about 9:01. It's Wednesday, October 25th. This is the monthly meeting of the State Board of Education. And we can start with a roll call.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Tom Lovett.
Here.
Aaliyah Wilburn.
Here.
Kim Gleason.
Here.
Richard Werner.
Here.
Tammy Colby.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lyle Jepson.
Here.
Jenna O'Farrell.
Here.
Mohammed Job. Gray Fioron. And Chair Samuelson.
Here. Good morning. Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, board announcements, I have a couple. First of all, I just want to start off by thanking everyone for shifting and shifting again for today's meeting. As you know, our regular monthly meeting is usually the third Wednesday of the month. And we had to shift it this month due to a scheduling conflict. So thank you guys all for accommodating that. And then, as you may have noticed, the agenda changed again on somewhat short notice because the interim secretary Boucher needs to attend a press conference today. So we have kind of an extended break in the middle of our meeting, which hopefully you all can put to good use before we rejoin at noon today. So thank you for that. And then I also wanted to note that I have another conflict and need to leave here at about 9:30. I should be done by 11, but it looks like I won't be rejoining until noon unless things finish earlier than I'm expecting. While I'm gone, I'm going to pass the gavel to Tammy and let her manage the meeting. The other thing is I heard from Aaliyah that she needs to leave by noon, so we'll miss the afternoon because she's traveling to her volleyball playoffs. So we can wish her lots of luck. And then the last board announcement that I had is I saw that Aziza Malik, the upper elementary teacher at Champlain Elementary School in Burlington, has been named the 2024 Vermont Teacher of the Year. You all might remember a few months ago, we heard from a lot of the candidates for Teacher of the Year. So Aziza won, and then it looks like the Teacher of the Year distinguished finalists were Courtney Paquette and Lindsay Cox of Winooski High School. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of them and just to say again how deeply appreciative we are to have such committed teachers who are passionate about their work and who share that passion with their students. Are there any other board announcements?
This may be a little off topic, but if people are bored and want to see something really cool on November 14th, my day job is having an annual meeting, the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region, and we're going to be at the Mint Makerspace. And from 5 to 6 that afternoon on November 14th, robotics teams from around the state may be competing on a new playing field at the Mint. And so if you want to see middle school and high school students who are from independent schools, private schools, public schools, home schools, all working together on their robotics project, it's pretty much the coolest thing I've seen in a long time. So if you're totally bored, come to the Mint Makerspace November 14th, which is Tuesday from 5 to 7. That's my advertising for today.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And these are, Lyle, these are teams from individual schools who are competing against each other. Is that right?
Well, Rutland Area Robotics is a combination of students from all over Rutland County, from private schools to public schools to homeschoolers. It's similar around the state. There's a team in Burlington, there's a team in Randolph area. And our team was fortunate enough to have gone in April to Houston, Texas to compete in the Worlds competition. And quite frankly, they are a world-class team. And so if you want to see what they can do, stop on down.
Thank you.
And Lyle, I think that's also advised by our former Teacher of the Year. Is that true?
So Karen McCullough works with the Lego League, which is one step
Got it.
younger, and
Okay.
she and her husband Scott are working with like 5 teams of kids. It's crazy what they're able to do. It's very exciting, and they too were in Houston showing off their skills in April. Just goes to show you what education does and the positive results. And the exciting thing about it, and I'm just going to keep going here until Jennifer stops me, is that you don't have to like robots to be part of the robotics team. There's a person who loves to do videography, and so she does the videos and all of the advertising, and she does the t-shirt designs. So there's lots of opportunity for students to use their skills as part of the team.
Thank you, Lyle. Any other board announcements? Oh, Mohammed.
Good morning, everyone. And I was just following up with Lyle. Is there a way you can send a flyer or that information you just briefly summed up to us? I'm interested in getting something from you to spread the word in my network.
I will send you, you're looking for an invitation to the annual meeting? Is that what, to the event?
Just a flyer that I can invite all the folks, in case I can't make it.
Everyone's welcome. I will send it to everybody on the screen. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other board announcements? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to turn to public to be heard. So if there are any members of the public who wish to be heard, if you're on the Teams platform, you can click on the hand icon to raise your hand. If you're calling in, you press *5 to raise your hand. We do have a limit of 2 minutes per person, and as always, anyone who wishes to submit written comments can email them to our public comment email address, which is SBE for State Board of Education. That's sbe.publiccomment@vermont.gov. So if there are any members of the public who wish to be heard, please raise your hand. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone. Does anyone else see any? Okay. Well, we can leave that open for a little bit. I think at this point, I'm going to skip over item C just because that's a longer chunk of time. But we could take up item D, which is approving the minutes from our September 20th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? I'll move. Is there a second?
I'll second. Thank you.
Is that Tammy? All right. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of our September 20th, 2023 meeting, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
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 And I see that Richard has raised his hand as Aaliyah. If there are any opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, we have approved the minutes of our September 20th, 2023 meeting. Thank you. Just circle back briefly if there are any members of the public who wish to be heard. Okay. Moving on, student report. I don't know if Gray has joined us yet, but Aaliyah, if you would like to share anything from your perspective and what's been going on at your school, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I can't turn my camera on. I'm not feeling too well, but school's going. I only have 3 classes a day, so I'm not there for my 4th period, which is kind of weird because I have to travel 40 minutes to go play volleyball for Linden Institute. we're currently in playoffs. We have our first round today, so hoping we get the win. Yeah, there's nothing really going on in school. I'm currently working on a campaign with some people from Vermont and the NAACP and other organizations. It's going to be called the Let Me Be Great campaign. We're holding our first conference type of deal on November 8th. And if you guys would like to come, I can send you the information. And it's open to anyone, mostly administration, like teachers will be there, but it's open to everybody. And so that's where most of my time is going right now, is just organizing the campaign and bringing awareness to it.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Any questions for Aaliyah? Kim.
Thanks for sharing, Aaliyah. I have had the privilege of being in some conversations with Addie and thinking about the future of VERSARN, which is Vermont Students Anti-Racism Network. And it's exciting, the work you all have done to date and the work you all continue to do. And I know it's interesting to think about how to build your structure for your organization in a way that is sustainable through sort of the generations, if you will, of students as you cycle through high school. So I applaud all the work you all are doing, and I'm grateful that you're keeping us up to date too. And so I'll definitely be looking for information on the conference. Thanks so much.
All right. Any other comments or questions for Aaliyah? All right. And has Gray joined us, or is he still not with us?
I'm here.
Oh, great.
Sorry, my camera wasn't working before. I don't know why, but I'm here now. At Virgens, I feel like a lot of stuff has been happening. All sports seasons are kind of coming to an end. So for most of the teams, they're in their playoff phase, and for me on cross country, we have states this weekend, so we really only have a week left of practice and stuff. We still have not had a concert band performance, but for jazz band, we've finally started things, and we actually have a jazz performance coming up pretty soon, just at a local pizza restaurant. So that's pretty cool. And then we had, well, a few were earlier, but at this point we've had all of our elections for class officers in all of the classes. I'm actually one of the class officers for our junior class. So we started all our meetings there. And we've hosted some class meetings, and we're starting to work towards fundraisers throughout the year. And then also, because with the junior class, we're starting to think about planning prom. So we've started to set up a prom planning committee to make sure we're ready for the spring. And the only other thing that I can think of is that I'm also a school board representative, and it's a very busy time of the year for our school board. So lots of things are happening with that, and we have 4 school board reps that meet usually once every 2 weeks. And so we've been working on that, and that's going well as well. Yeah, that's about it.
Oh, great. Thank you for the update. It does seem like the fall has gone by really quickly, and it's hard to imagine that, sports are winding down and Aaliyah's in playoffs, and, we're starting to think about winter sports because it still kind of feels like summer outside.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions for Gray? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to circle back one more time for public to be heard. Oh, actually, we're still kind of ahead of schedule, so I'll leave that open a little bit longer. Okay, so what I actually might do is jump ahead to the Secretary Search Committee update, because I wanted to provide an update about the search for the next Secretary of Education and just ensure that everyone understands the process that we've undertaken. There have been a few incorrect reports in the local newspaper, so I just wanted to take an opportunity to correct that. And I had a couple of points. One is that the Secretary of Education is the only cabinet level position over which the governor doesn't have full discretion over the appointment. As you recall, under statute, that duty for selecting candidates falls in the first instance to the board, and then we recommend at least 3 candidates to the governor. This is the only cabinet level position where that is the case. In every other instance, it's the governor who just makes that appointment directly without sort of having this underlying search conducted by another entity. So it makes this process a little bit unusual. And it's just, you know, when the committee formed, we looked at what had been done in past Secretary of Education searches. There's actually not a lot of information from the 2016 Secretary search. I was unable to locate any agenda or meeting minutes of that. So this committee, which is Lyle, Jenna, and me, really kind of used the 2018 Secretary search as the foundation for, you know, how we patterned this one. And then, you know, I think we kind of went above and beyond. So we added to that process that had been followed in 2018 in 3 key ways. First, we availed ourselves of the assistance of the Department of Human Resources. I don't believe that had been done before, but it was a terrific resource that was available to us. They met with us, helped us to craft the job description, helped us figure out where to advertise, and helped us with the job postings. We also ran the job description by the Office of Racial Equity to receive their input before we finalized the job description and sent it out. And that input that we received was really invaluable. We implemented a lot of the recommendations, and I think, you know, really strengthened the job description that went out. And third, we hosted a public comment hearing to solicit more feedback from members of the public regarding the desired qualities and attributes that they were seeking in our next secretary. Because we really wanted to expand, you know, the input that we were receiving, so it wasn't just, you know, driven by the board. And to that end, we received, I think, 21 written comments from people, you know, either in the course of committee meetings or the public comment hearing. I asked Maureen and Suzanne to compile those all again in one location as an attachment to today's agenda, so that it's an easy place for people to reference if they're, you know, interested in looking at the comment that we've received. And included in that public comment is a compilation report that was submitted by the VSBA, VPA, and VSA that had responses from almost 100 principals, superintendents, and teachers about the qualities and attributes that they were looking for. So I really wanted to thank those 3 organizations, VSBA, VPA, and VSA, for taking that initiative, and again, really allowing us to receive a lot of comment from people who are ultimately going to be affected by the ultimate Secretary of Education. The committee has spent a lot of time reviewing that comment that we've received. We've used it to inform the questions that we're asking of candidates. You know, we've really taken that very seriously and really appreciate all of the input that we've received. With regard to the process, I believe the job was posted on September 13th. We closed it, we did extend it by a week, but we closed it on October 12th. So the position was open for almost a month. We've received 19 applications. We've gone through all of them. We have extended invitations for interviews, which will be held next week. And then the plan is that once we interview the candidates, the committee will meet in executive session. I mean, this is all in executive session to review the responses. So we will be asking the same questions of all candidates. We have developed a rubric for sort of reviewing the responses that we receive. And then as a committee, we'll meet together and look at, you know, how we have each assessed the questions and the responses thereto. And the plan is then to come before the full board in November and again, meet in executive session to discuss the candidates, the questions, the answers, the committee's recommendation for the candidates that we would like to recommend to the governor. And then as a full board, we'll discuss that. And the plan is to have at least 3 candidates to recommend to the governor for his consideration at the conclusion of our November board meeting. So I just threw a lot out there, but I don't know if there are any questions or comments either about the process or anything in that regard. Mohammed.
I just want to say I really applaud the process. It sounds really very thoughtful and beautiful. And thank you all for the time you have put into this. And I was also, and still I am, really impressed by the number of folks who reached out to us around this hiring process and the qualities they are looking into, most of which that just sent me back to how I learned to speak French myself. It's like, wow, we all come from a different world, but reading all this, even I woke up in the middle of the night and just reviewed some of the documents and emails. It's just so resonates to me a lot. I'm going to say thanks to Jeff Francis and his team as well for their question. They contributed to this. I read every recommendation out there. I did not sleep a wink last night. I just kept reviewing and bouncing back to them. I really appreciate the world around us in the thoughtful process and the contributions they had to add to the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jen?
Yeah.
1 second. Hi, I didn't know if you could see me.
Yeah, I did call on you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Something must have glitched up here. Anyway, I apologize. Thank you for the update on the process. That's very helpful. And I know one of the concerns had been that it hadn't been a more nationally coordinated search. And I'm wondering if by virtue of the 19 applicants, you have a sense that it had a broad diversity of applicants in that it would have been able to have reached those that we might have otherwise had we been using a search firm. And I don't know if that's even a reasonable or fair question, not hailing from the education arena. I'm not sure that I would know, but I wonder if you have a sense.
We did receive applicants from other states. So I do feel like the advertisement was sort of picked up and not just like neighboring states. We got applications from as far away as Florida. So
yeah. Thank you. And that's helpful. I had the opportunity to be part of 2 superintendent searches, and we did use support from other agencies or from the VSBA in both cases. And that does broaden the experience, but it sounds as though your process was really very inclusive in that. I'm really grateful for, and I'm glad that we received so many applications. That's terrific.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, so one last call for public comment before we close that. And at this point, I'm going to step away. I'm going to turn my camera off, and then I will rejoin the meeting as soon as I'm able. But I'm going to pass this over to Tammy. And it looks like, Tammy, just if you've been following along, I think we're right up at the Act 173 update if everyone's ready to go. So, all righty. Thank you. I'll be back as quickly as I can.
We'll see you in a few minutes. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. I think that we are now on agenda item C. I know we've bounced around a little bit, so I just want to be clear to the public where we are. We've set aside about 45 minutes for this discussion, and so I'll keep time on that. But this is a requested update by the board for AOE to provide us additional information on the implementation of the Act 173 requirements, particularly the fiscal component. And for those of you who are less familiar with that, Act 173 fundamentally changed how the state provides its supplemental funding for special education, local special education programs, moving from a reimbursement system to a block grant system. So I believe we have Brad James here. Good morning, Brad. It's good to see you. So I think I'm going to turn the floor over to Brad and let him kick us off with an overview of where the agency is in terms of implementation, and then we'll open up the floor to specific questions from the board.
Sure. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Because I'm never sure on my computer. Okay, you're hearing me fine. Brad James, Agency of Education. I'm the Director of Education Finance, and special education falls under my general overview, I guess is the best way to put it. I will first start saying I'm not an expert on special education. The people who work with me are, and then the people who are on the program side are also special, or the experts. So if we want to talk about the fiscal side of things, this is our second year of the census block grant. As Tammy said, we have moved from a reimbursement system to a census block grant system. So instead of reimbursing people on their actual costs, we now say this is how much you're going to get per ADM. It's a little more involved than that, but this is how much you're going to get per ADM. All the LEAs, i.e. the supervisor unions and districts, are moving towards the same amount per year, which will happen in FY27. So we're now in the second year of it. One of the big concerns from people when we began this was there was not going to be enough money coming from the census block grant. I think in some cases that's probably the case, although we haven't heard too many people complaining that they're not getting enough money. It doesn't mean their special education costs are going down. It just means you're being paid by a different source, basically, what's happening. So we're transitioning to that. People are keeping an eye on it, and we're waiting to hear what people have to say about it. We're still doing the extraordinary piece. There was the extraordinary special education costs over and above a certain threshold amount per pupil, and there was a change in statute for how that was calculated. It used to be paid 95%. The state paid 95% of the amount over that threshold, and it changed to where it's. Without going into the details of it, it basically we're almost not quite doubling the amount of extraordinary threshold money that the state is paying. So the districts they may have lost a little bit on the census block grant side, but they've gained a little bit on the extraordinary. How that plays out is going to vary from place to place, whether they're whole or not. I would say that's probably the update on the funding piece. Generally speaking, I mean, it's moving forward. I'm not sure if people like it or not, but it's moving forward. So that's that side of it. My understanding was there was also a question about the recommendations from the advisory group that came from Act 173 that we were being too restrictive in our documentation requirements for maintenance of effort for the LEAs. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I feel that's the case, and the reason is, I mean, well, the issue was, and I think this was true. In the old system that we were doing for documentation, we're using time and effort. It was pretty intense from what I'm understanding from the school districts or the LEAs. And I do believe it was more restrictive than the federal requirements. But over the course of implementing Act 173 and working with the advisory group, we have come out with different methodologies that people can use for their documentation that we feel are less restrictive. We've not gotten much feedback from the LEAs saying that these are more restrictive. They're too cumbersome and complex. So I'm not sure if that's a real concern at this point or not. So you guys can ask me questions about that later on. One of the things that we do have to do with the maintenance of effort now is because we don't collect the information like we used to when we were under the reimbursement system. The LEAs have to do their own maintenance of effort calculations, and that's new to them because we used to do it for them because we had the information. At this point, though, we don't have the information because we're not making that collection any longer. But we have the Center for IDEA-B Finance Reporting, Cipher, has come out with a, thank you, has come out with a maintenance of effort calculator, and we've been rolling that out to the LEAs to help them. And what we're doing is we're backfilling that with the background information from the prior years, and they're putting in the new information for the current year, and that's allowing them to do it. And then we're working with them to say how's this going, et cetera. We're quite involved with them. I think that's kind of a very broad overview from my perspective, unless somebody thinks I really missed something. That's nice to see everybody that I know in here, by the way. I haven't seen you guys for a while.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Why don't we open up the floor for questions then? I know that some board members, including myself, had some questions for you, Brad,
Sure.
but I won't lead on that. I'll open the floor to others first. Kim?
I'm positive that, Tammy, your questions are going to be better articulated and better informed than mine would be on the funding piece of this. A more general question is the interplay with tuition for independent schools and navigating as an LEA the amounts now received through the census. And is there any calculation that would account for the tuition to independent schools and perhaps reduction in the revenue related to what they're now getting for census block as an LEA for students with special needs?
No, the way the current current statute is written is that special education is an LEA specific cost where the student is coming from, regardless of where they're going to school. So if they're going to one of the approved independent schools, then they either have a special education tuition, which the LEA pays, and then they cover that with their block grant or extraordinary costs. Or if the approved independent school would have what's called excess costs, as the state defines it, over and above the regular education or regular tuition or special education tuition if it's not included in that. And that cost would also go back to the LEA. And so the LEA, so basically what they're doing is they're invoicing it. And then the census block grant would hopefully cover most of it, the regular parts, and then the extraordinary costs, special education reimbursement, will cover a large part of it too.
And so if the tuition is going to the independent schools, they can bill back for excess to that tuition related to their special ed expenses. The LEA, though, is not, unless it's in that extraordinary category, the LEA is absorbing that from whatever other block funding they've got for their entire LEA and would pay that back. What is the accountability mechanism for those additional costs?
Under IDEA, Kim, the LEA always has responsibility for the child.
Yeah,
right?
no, for sure.
So that's the challenge I think that you're getting at, is the issue, and this may be a question for Brad. I think the challenge, and this has been raised by the Act 173 group, I know, and the agency has looked at it, this is an ongoing challenge, is that while the LEA may delegate some of the authority for serving that child in an independent school setting, they're still responsible for that child's IEP, which includes any costs around paying for implementing that IEP. And there's been a long-standing sort of friction between LEAs and independent schools and other placements around how the IEP is implemented and the extent to which the LEA has control over what it is that they actually provide and the cost effectiveness of the services and the way that they're provided. I think that's what you're getting at. That's not specifically related to the funding system, but that's one of the rubs in the current system. And I think that's one of the things that the Act 173 group talked about and brought forward in their report. So I think perhaps the question to Brad is, to what extent are we tracking that in terms of, under a reimbursement system, we were able to see very specifically, right, the dollars and sort of how they went back and forth, and we're not able to see that in the same way anymore. Is that something that the agency is tracking?
I would say we don't see it as the state, as the agency. The LEAs do, and so it's kind of their responsibility. We don't see that coming back into us. In terms of tracking, we with COVID, we fell apart on our monitoring, and so we have not been monitoring special education the way we should be. We are ramping that back up at this point. We are working with the federal monitoring group, Cassandra Ryan's group, to start this process to get back out there, because we are behind on it, and so we are ramping that up with the team to start going out there and doing more of the monitoring. One of the things that we'll be using quite a bit for that is that MOE calculator that Cypher put out.
But at the state board being a rulemaking body, right? Like, we don't have control over finances, right? That's the agency's domain and the legislature, the governor's office. But with respect to rules, I think the question that I would have that's related to all this is, is there a need in the rules to clarify this relationship and sort of how this exchange works, right, between LEAs and independent schools in particular, right, with respect to service provision and how that communication and what the obligations are in terms of communication and sort of responsibility with spending. My understanding from the 173 report is that there was a request for additional rulemaking around that to help clarify that relationship and the obligations on both sides. And I think, I'd be interested in sort of your take on that.
I may not be the best person to answer this, but I'll tell you what I know. I do know that with the new rules that have been put in place, that we're working through those right now with the independent schools, and it's not always a smooth process, but we are working towards that. I think my inclination would be is, before you go making more rules or identifying more rules, let's see where we end up in about a year, and then come back and revisit that, because I think like anything, there's a transition period, and I think that's what we're in right now. We on the AOE side are trying to figure out how we need to be talking to everybody and getting everybody up to speed, getting independent schools to be talking to the LEAs and vice versa, and it's a three-way conversation. I think we're trying to get that really organized. I'm not sure how well we're doing, but we're trying to get that organized and in place.
Thanks, Brad. I see Jenna's hand and then Kim's hand.
I'm wondering, when Timmy mentioned the monitoring of the expenses, are you thinking about like related services in bulk or individually? Like, what is the cost per service and how consistent are services priced? Like, what's the price point of related services for LEA, and is there like an inconsistency or I don't know, a rate's incredibly different from region and service providers? And when you say clarify the relationship, are we clarifying the relationship just like how that happens, or at the price point? Because I'm trying to just kind of figure out the two. So I guess the question might be for Tammy and for Brad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
I'm letting Brad answer all the questions today.
Let me do the price piece first. I think if you were to get the costs from all the LEAs for all the services they provide, from all the different providers. I think the vast majority of them are in-house. So my guess is those are probably fairly similar to each other across the state. But I think when you start contracting out, because a lot of these services are contracted, a lot of the independent schools do also do contracting out. I think that's where you're going to start seeing some pretty wide variances between what the cost per service is. I don't want to say cost per unit because that sounds like a kid then, but the cost per service. I think you would find a pretty wide variation at that point. And I think the monitoring that our folks will be doing is saying, is this a reasonable cost? Is really what they'll be looking at, I think. And I think they'll be basing that on information that we know as we learn more and more and more. And what your second question was, forgot your second question. I'm sorry, Jenna.
It was around the clarifying a relationship. Is it more clarifying I don't know if it's so much around the service provision or the expenses, right? Because I think the IEP in lots of ways has a really clear sense of what the relationship is going to be. And I don't know if it's more relational or it's more financial. It's the root of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think from my perspective, it's getting everybody on the same page so that we're all understanding what we expect from each other, what should be happening, and that can be financial too, because I mean there's always been discussion what really is meant by an excess cost, and that varies from place to place to place. And so one place it may not be an excess cost, another place it may be. So it's hard to get uniformity throughout all of this. We don't have the authority to go in and tell everybody this is what you're going to do, and I'm not sure we want that authority. But so what we're trying to do is get everybody more or less on the same playing field so that we all understand what we mean when we're saying things. And I think that's the clarification part I was referencing.
Any follow-up questions, Jenna? You all set, Jenna? Kim?
Yeah, I'm not sure which to go first with. I had a follow-up from mine or earlier question and then a follow-up from Jenna's, and maybe they meld together. So with the notion or the consideration of the tuition being sent now with the requirement that the approved independent schools are approved to receive public tuition if they are able to serve students with special needs and meet certain other requirements of their enrollment process and otherwise. So to the extent that that happens, would it seem reasonable to expect then that those services on the IEP are something that they can service? So the billing back would not necessarily be but for those excess costs, as opposed to regular service of that IEP, presumably if they're approved to receive public tuition, should mean they're able to deliver those services. Is that?
I understand what you're asking. I think that's an excellent question. That kind of does go back to what Jenna was asking, in my mind anyway. Because I think that is one of the rubs, where my understanding of, and I could be wrong, my understanding of this right now is that with the approved independent schools that are eligible now for public tuition, it's a self-reporting mechanism. I don't believe that we are going out and saying, are you actually doing this in terms of, can you do this before the districts sign a contract to then give you money? So I think it's self-reporting. I do know that some of the approved independent schools have chosen not to follow that way, and so they're not getting public tuition money any longer. I then think the follow-up is kind of going back to what I was saying with Jen, I believe, where we're now talking about we're now talking about how are the services being provided within that tuition. Is your special education tuition covering what you need, or are you contracting? And I do believe, my understanding is that a number of approved independent schools are saying, yes, we can provide these services, but they're not necessarily providing them all in-house. They're contracting a number of them out. I can't give you specific examples because I haven't seen numbers, but that's the information that I'm hearing back from people. It would be nice if we could make it uniform, but I don't think that will ever happen. I think we can tighten it up a little bit, and I think that's getting everybody on the same playing field so that we're all talking in the same way and everybody has the same understanding. Again, I think we're in a transition period because this is all new. And so I think we're working that first big glomp of it, trying to figure out how we're all moving forward.
Yeah, I think in zooming back up to sort of the LEA level, the IEP is provided, and it as long as the tuition provided is allowing them to meet that IEP, if it's in-house or they need to bring in contract services, that may be not consequential to the LEA if those services are being provided at a quality that's expected of by the IEP. I think it's more if in contracting out something that might otherwise be provided in a typical setting within their public schools is now then billed back. I would see that problematic. So I think that one's not resolved today, but I think it as Tammy identified, has been a rub and a challenge. I think the other question, though, that might lead to accountability on this is having the tracking be at the AOE level. Having the tracking at the LEA level could very well mean you've got an independent school who's got students from multiple LEAs, and we're not seeing any thematic challenges or capacity concerns regarding providing services or expense issues aren't going to be identified if it's only looked at the LEA level. There certainly should be and must be accountability measures at the LEA level, but it would seem to make the most sense to me that that has a place to live where, as a state, since it's statewide funding, we can see if there are themes around challenges with providing services in any manner. That might be through our public schools or our independent schools. You identify capacity issues when you can see themes.
I understand that, and I don't think I disagree with your idea that that's where it should be. I'm not sure we have that authority, though. Our authority as to what we can ask from the independent school is fairly limited. I think it's expanded a little bit with the new rules, but not significantly. But I take your point, and I think that'll be a good discussion internally for us to see where we are on that. I'm kind of dancing around the answer, but
maybe it's identified.
Well, I want to keep the conversation a box that's relative to what the state board can do. So what I'm hearing here is that this might be something with respect to the rules that we need to consider, right? So if this is something, for example, Kim, that you think is a priority, but the agency doesn't feel as if it has the authority in the rules, then that's something we would need to consider with respect to the rules, correct? Is that, I just want to sort of summarize the conversation where we are here.
Is it the rules that you're finding limiting, Brad, to be able to house this information, even if collected through the LEA? The LEA has to get it from the independent school, right? So I'm wondering where the rub is in getting that information from the LEA as identified by where they're getting it.
No, I think don't think we need to do any change. I think I interpreted your question differently. I think we can certainly get the information from the LEAs. There's a section in statute that says they need to report things to us that are reasonably required, that we require that are reasonable. And not something that's crazy. And I think this would be a reasonable thing. So I think we could do that. I do think we have that authority. And I interpret your question differently. And so I think we could probably do that. Say, what services are being provided by whom, where, at what cost, et cetera.
Okay. I think that's what I was wanting to make sure before we have new rules to do, Tammy.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wait a minute. I think we might be able to do this.
Yeah, the rulemaking process is involved. So let us look at that, and we'll take that back and discuss that internally and see what. Yeah, clearly I'll need to talk to Emily Simmons, our general counsel, about this, and Heather. Have a bunch of us talking. But yeah.
Thank you.
Mohammed?
Oh, thank you, Tammy. And thank you, Brad, for being with us today. I'm hearing a lot, and it's sounding like this is a program that is being piloted this year, meaning I see a lot of learning coming out of it. I also kind of anticipate a lot of inequities around the spending. And by that, I'm concerned we will have issues around feeling not being equal. And again, understanding being equal is not that simple and easy, but I invite us all to think about it, because I anticipate a competition out there, especially from the external providers who would charge unbelievable amount of money to serve our students. But we all, again, want to serve our students, of course. And how can we say, for example, student A with an IEP in Northeast is we're spending, let's say, $500 on them per week, and then there is a student in the South that we are spending $1,500 a week on them. It just sounds, unbelievable, but it's just an example I'm putting out there, and I'm slightly concerned about it.
Well, just to slightly address that, we do have a process where we do set a maximum tuition for a lot of the therapeutic schools that are out there. And they say, here's what services we're going to provide for this tuition, and we have an internal team that sets that maximum rate. And then if there's something, then if they don't provide a service, then they don't necessarily charge that maximum rate. If there's a service that the student requires over and above what's included in that maximum rate, then that would be an excess cost from that therapeutic school. On the approved independent school side, I don't think it's quite as structured. There is an approved in special education tuition rate for a number of the approved independent schools. That I think that is probably discussion with the LEAs themselves as to what is being covered by that rate. I don't know one way or the other, frankly, to be perfectly honest. But there'll be a discussion with the LEA and the independent school that they're paying tuition to as to what's being provided. Hopefully their costs would be reasonable, because the LA would say, no, that's too much. Even though we need to provide for that school, we're going to, because even if the student is at the approved independent school, the LA can still provide services if that's the decision point that the two make.
Thank you, Brad.
Lyle?
Thank you. It's nice to see you, Brad. Tell me you don't want to go there with this question, but in the past,
can I say that before you ask?
Oh, sure. In the past, there was also a reimbursement process to tech centers that were full-day programs that had special ed services. How is that organized now? How is that implemented?
Yeah, Lyle, off the top of my head, I honestly don't know, and I'd have to get back to you on that one. I do not know.
Fair enough. Thanks.
There are no other questions. I'd like to ask one more. Brad, I'll let you write down your notes, and then I
got it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Brad, the 173 committee came out with a number of statements, and I know it's been discussed by that committee over the years. And with respect to how state dollars, the rules and interpretation of the law around how state dollars can be used. And one of the underlying tenets, right, of Act 173 and the block grant was to provide districts with increased flexibility in how they could use those dollars. And that was done, right, to align with the state's priorities for multi-tiered systems of support and early intervention, and also as a response to our comparatively high identification rates for students with disabilities, and the sort of the evidence base that suggested that our reimbursement model was incentivizing local education agencies to identify students with disabilities in order to tap into state dollars to basically provide them with needed services, even though they may not have been technically disabled under the federal law. So the Act 173 committee came back a couple times, and they allude to this again in their report, that there seems to be some disagreement around sort of the interpretation of both federal statute and regulations with respect to MOE and MFS, MOE being the state's maintenance efforts, and then the district's requirement is maintenance of financial support, MFF.
The ceiling looks like it just needs to be scraped.
Somebody, Richard, I believe that you are not on mute. Thank you. Right, and so there's been some friction around this, right? And this was also in the report. And there was a request on the part, right? And I think this is one of the things that sort of preempted today's discussion. There was a request for the state board to take a look at because there might be the need for additional rulemaking and clarification around, for what purposes, what constitutes appropriate spending under, both state and federal law and regulations. So I guess my question is I heard you say that you're using the cipher calculator for MFS for districts, but I'm curious as to why this is still sort of coming up. What is it that's going on where we're seeing requests from the Act 173 group for the state board to take a look at the regulations to ensure that they have sufficient flexibility and their ability to use those dollars coming out of the block grant to support their multi-tiered systems of support, as well as provide necessary services with students with IEPs. Can you help me understand sort of where the friction here is?
I think, I'm not sure because I haven't heard it direct. I haven't heard the questions directly. I think one of the thoughts was that we have the census block grant. So it's X number of dollars, depending on where you are, that, aggregated together, you have this total, and people want to say that's how much money we're using. And we have checked with several people. We've checked with Cipher. We've checked with Bruce and Manasevich, who does a lot of our consulting. Can you just use the census block grant as an amount that we're using and spending on special education? The answer was a definite no, because it's not meeting the federal requirements of more or less specifying in detail what's going on and where those monies are going. So that may be one of the problems. Again, these are still federal requirements. We do think that we have become more flexible in terms of what they can do. We have heard some information from Cipher that we're following up on that, and I think we're probably sometimes doing this. It's that sometimes a service being provided to a special education student on their IEP is also being provided to another group of students who need help, but they're not on IEPs. And right. I think in the past that has not been allowed. That as a part of policy. And I think we've moved to the discussion with Cipher, or not Cipher, pardon me, CCSSO is where it first came out, I believe, and with USN that is an allowable cost, and that we're moving in that direction. So I think we're still on a learning curve. We're happy to listen to things that people are asking. Okay. Frankly, we're not hearing a lot back from the field. Cassandra Ryan and her monitoring group went out and did 4 regional trainings throughout the state, like a year or so ago, I can't remember when, and talked about all this stuff and said, here are the things that we can do differently and stuff. And people were very responsive and liked it. We've not heard negative feedback coming back, though, at this point. Our special ed folks out in the field, Meg Porcel and Chris Kane primarily, who run the special ed program side of things, are also not hearing a lot of feedback from business managers, special education directors. They think it sounds like the flexibility that we think we have is working fairly well. Jennifer Perry, who's in charge of the special ed under me, basically, is not hearing lots of feedback either. We're there and open for feedback, but we're not hearing a lot of people saying that they think it's a problem. They think it's too restrictive. They think that we're not counting on things. I think one of the things that got people's attention was that the LEAs have to do the calculation themselves. But I think what Jennifer has done quite well is worked with them with this maintenance of effort calculator that is being rolled out, and I think that's allaying a lot of people's fears. There are different ways people can do this. My understanding is that a lot of people's new HR systems can do this if they're doing an hourly type thing or a salary type thing, if it's set up correctly. And I think one of the things that we're looking to do as we ramp up this monitoring, as we're doing monitoring, giving people technical advice while we're there in terms of what needs to be done, or what can be done, I guess I should say. But we basically have a fair number of different ways of saying this is how you can document your information. I may be going in the wrong direction with this conversation, but of how you can document.
The general concern that was brought up in the 173 report is that LEAs were feeling as if they had insufficient flexibility in how they were going to use those dollars, and that there might be a need for additional rulemaking that clarified how they could use those dollars, which I think was really one of the things that prompted us inviting you here. And it sounds as if that the agency has shifted its position and it has grown in its understanding, right, with the help of Cypher and others, to understand that MFS, the maintenance of financial support, that on the part of districts, is the federal guidelines are far broader than what we have used historically in the state, and we need not be as concerned, for example, about grouping students and things along those lines, and that state dollars that would count against sort of our federal match, right, can be used in a pretty broad set of ways, right, and not sort of the historical sort of reimbursement only for IEP services, et cetera. So I think that was just one of the concerns that was brought up by the 173 group, that there seemed to be not an insufficient amount of flexibility being allowed for by the agency, and there was an ask to the board to consider rulemaking that would give them additional flexibility.
And again, as I said, we're not hearing from the folks in the field that this is an issue. Apparently, from what we're hearing, is that people are able to use the money more flexibly. Again, I can't give you any details, but we're not hearing people saying this is not flexible enough. We can't count this. Why not? And if there is that question, we have people sit down and work with them, and we go to see, and then we check into it and see if we can do it or not. And if we can, we do. So we're trying to be responsive.
It sounds as if the agency is working on being flexible and more responsive around these issues, and that at least at this point, to me, it doesn't sound like there's a need for the state board to step in with additional clarifications in the rules. Heather?
Yeah, just as I'm listening and reflecting on the conversation, it's sounding like we maybe can do a better job at the agency of distinguishing between the services that are allowed. I know we have done this, but maybe just get the word out more clearly, and the documentation that's required. Because I also heard what you said, Brad, earlier, which is, look, we've gone to the feds and tried to say, can we just use this wonderful new way we do our state dollars for special ed basically as our documentation? And they've basically said, no, you may not. And so I'm wondering if that's part of the rub as well, which is that when we actually passed 173, we were probably conflating a bunch of different things. We were right in our conversations. We were conflating. There is flexibility in the service provision side of things. There is flexibility in what can be counted for reimbursement. There maybe isn't as much flexibility as folks would have thought around how to document that. And I'm wondering if that is where the rub is, and we can perhaps do a better job as we get questions of really clarifying that, because it is complicated. It's very complicated. There's no question about it. So I just wanted to share, I kind of am having another aha moment of the many that I've had with respect to 173, where I'm like, oh, now I get it. I'm getting where that confusion lies.
That's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Great. Thanks, of course, to Brad and Heather for chiming in, but Jennifer, I know you've been here to support during the conversation, and welcome and thank you for your time this morning. So if there are no further questions, we will move on in the agenda. And again, thank you to the agency for your willingness to come answer our litany of questions this morning. We just want to make sure that when we see things coming out of, for example, 173 reports where there's some suggestion that there needs a need for additional rulemaking, that we're thinking that through in advance, and sort of also hearing from the agency about how you may or may not need additional support. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Brad. I'd also just add for the good of the order, we didn't hear from Jen Perry, but as Brad would agree, she really is she's the wizard behind the you know, she's the Wizard of Oz. She's the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. She's
Jen is spectacular.
yeah. she's behind the curtain.
Most finance people are in agencies, so the agency doesn't run without people like Jen. Okay, so moving on in the agenda, I know that we've sort of, you know, shaken the snow globe a little bit here this morning, but I'd like to take this time now to move on to our Rules Series 2000 committee update. I'm unsure who it is delegated to provide that update in Jennifer's absence. Do we have someone, or should we wait on Jennifer coming back for that one?
2000 would be you and me.
Oh, that's right.
EQS.
Thank you. No, you. I'm like 2200.
Who else can we delegate to that?
I will admit that I frequently will refer to 2000 as 2200. And I don't know, too many 2000s. So Kim, do you want to provide the updates since I'm chairing here? Thanks.
Sure. So I think the biggest update is that while our original public comment period was to have closed on the 15th of October, we recognized that there was a need to sort of document, and Jennifer was able to do that by virtue of a memo. Some of the areas where we were imagining there to be some alignment, we talked about it as a board around some language in the independent school rules, which are 2200, and our 2000 EQS rules. And when that was documented and entered as public comment, it seemed as though it would benefit from an extension of that public comment period. So we extended the period to the 25th, I think, right, Tammy? Is that today, till the end of the day today. And I noticed that we have received some additional public comments since that time, a handful, which for those who maybe don't realize, on the State Board of Ed part of the AOE website, there is a button called Rulemaking in Progress, and there you can see all public comment that's been received. When this period has closed, we will be looking to sort of catalog by themes, to the extent we can, the comments we've heard, and the committee will be meeting to take a look at those comments and formulate an appropriate response. It might be that it's been considered in the earlier phases and there's no changes. It might be that it's being considered and we need additional testimony. It might be that it's being considered and we think that's a great recommendation where our committee feels comfortable forwarding that to the full board. So the committee will have work to do, and the cataloging piece, we're fortunate that Sarah Buxton, the attorney who's working with us on this, will be taking the lead on putting them together, not the responses. That will remain the responsibility of our committee. So our committee should stay tuned. Tammy and I are going to work on some scheduling ourselves to offer a couple of dates for you all to try and have us be able to convene and talk about what the process is going to look like, almost an orientation, because our committee, as currently constituted, is new. And this phase in the rulemaking process would warrant a little discussion of just understanding what comes next. And then we will be able to put on our schedule perhaps more regular EQS meetings in the hopes of, by the end of the year, being able to make a proposal to the full state board on any amendments and changes. Any questions on that? Or Tammy, what did I miss?
The only thing I think I just would respond to, and you know, we all watch the press here, that there has, you know, the board has come under some critique with respect to, you know, walking back language on discrimination in the rule-making process. I think there are just a couple of things for all of us to keep in mind on this, is that both the EQS and the rules, and I'm going to get the numbers right this time, the 2200 series, are still open. Right? There is no language that has been finalized in any document at this point, and it has long been the intent of this board to try to true those two documents up in the process to make sure that we have identical language or nearly identical language in the 2200 series and the 2000 series as it relates to discrimination and implementing other provisions of Act 1. So this has come up in the last week or so by some of our journalist colleagues in the state. And so I just want to be clear that it's still the board's intent to do that. The EQS is still open for public comment, again, through the end of today. And that there actually is no requirements that we stop receiving public comment after that date. So if it comes in tomorrow, I suspect we'll still look at it on the EQS. And also that the 2200 series is open at the same time. So just to be clear, there is no settled language on anything, right? Because both sets of rules are open. But in the end, the intent is for those two rules to mirror one another. So there would not be two different sets of rules. There's two different sets of standards, one for independent schools and one for public schools. That is not the board's intent. And it also is the intent to make sure that whatever language goes in either document, and both documents, let me be clear, both documents, is language that is consistent with federal and state law. To not do that would put the rule at risk of a lawsuit, and would put that, in doing so, that would also put the rule at risk, both rules at risk of being unimplementable. And I don't think anybody wants that in the end. That would be sort of a gross misstep on the part of the board to make sure that we put a rule in place that was unable to be implemented, especially with respect to domains and topics and rules, components of the rules that are so important with respect to protecting students in the state and also complying with the intent and purpose of Act 1. So just a little bit of context there, and just being clear about where the board is and what our intent is over the next several months. It will be to make sure that those two rules stay in parallel with one another.
Thanks, Tammy. And I think
any questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. So in a similar vein, with 2200 being open, to the extent the comments related to the definitions or otherwise the areas where we're looking to align language should be submitted to both sets of rules. So those having opinion on those matters would want to submit those opinions to both sets of rules because the committees are independent. I happen to be on both of those committees, but each of the committees will be considering the information independently with the intent for there to be alignment. So it would be good practice if folks have concerns to make those submissions to both. And I'm trying to remember, I think we can wait for Jennifer to let us know the timeline on that 2200 being open and closing for comment.
Yep.
I know that information is available. I just don't have it in front of me.
We'll have a Rule 2200 series update in just a minute. Any questions for the board on where things are with the Rule Series 2000, not 2200? EQS?
Otherwise known as Ed Quality Standards.
Ed Quality Standards. Any questions or concerns out there? Great. Hopefully it's a question and not a concern.
Well, and just a comment maybe that I like the fact that you talked about the journalism, our journalism colleagues, and I know that they're often under deadlines, but we want to encourage them to reach out to get as accurate as information as possible. I know that one person reached out to me and said, "Hey, I hear you only have 7 applications for the Secretary of Education position." And I said, "I have no idea where you got that information, but let us clarify that." Sometimes when I read things, I feel like, well, I was at that meeting and I don't think that's what we said. So I know that many things are subject to interpretation. I appreciate journalists when they reach out to get accurate information, and we want to work with them very closely with making sure the public is aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it. And it's all a process. And sometimes it's a process we don't necessarily have control over, and it takes a long time. And so we appreciate the patience of everyone.
And I would add to that, sometimes the processes aren't very logical, right? We have some convoluted processes and processes that aren't particularly transparent or well understood. And certainly the rulemaking process, if you're outside that process, can look rather opaque and not one that's well understood. So I agree with you. I just will say, though, as a reminder, I think the state, as a group, we did agree, I think it was last winter, that for comments to the press, that would those responding to press requests for comment from the press would be handled by the chair. And I did in her absence last week when she was away out of the country. So if you're getting press requests, please forward them to the chair. Tom?
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if there's been anything done with or any movement or revision of the IRIS documents that we saw earlier. What's this? Where are they, and what's being done with them?
Yeah, the IRIS documents are going to need to get taken up. At our last meeting, we did that. The review of the IRIS documents was delegated to the EQS subcommittee, and that subcommittee will take those up. We need to sort of work through public comment first. There's a limited number of meetings and capacity in that committee. So as soon as we can work through public comment and make whatever necessary revisions to the EQS based on those comments, then we will be taking up the IRIS documents.
Thank you.
Just a matter of capacity, Tom.
And I understand that.
I know you do. Thanks. Other comments? Other questions? Great, thanks. Okay, I want to move on to our future meeting planning agenda item. I have some notes from Jennifer to share, and of course we want to open this up for discussion. In her notes, she just wanted people to be aware that at the November meeting, we will meet an executive session to discuss candidates for the Secretary of Education with the goal of recommending at least to the governor for his consideration, a slate of candidates. So keep that in mind for the November meeting, that in addition to our regular agenda, we also will have an executive session, and that could be a substantial conversation and should be a substantial conversation and a chunk of time on the agenda. Second, of course, at the November meeting, I would anticipate likely we will have an update from the EQS committee with likely a draft document, and like was the case last spring. We would likely not ask for a vote at the first sort of inkling of when you saw a revised document coming out of it, but certainly the EQS committee will most likely be coming back to you as a board with its sort of summary of public comment and its recommendations for change, if any changes, and if no changes, why? So you can anticipate that. And the same thing with 2200, likely to have an update there as well. There may be an update at that point on our construction funds work that's being done. I know Rich has been liaising with the agency on that. And also an update from SEEP from Katie Ballard. Were there any other things that people had in their radar screen that we would need to be thinking about for the November agenda? A lot going on. Kim?
I think it won't be November because I think we'll have too full a meeting, but I think at some point it would benefit another sort of legislative anticipation conversation. We may have identified any of our subcommittees' recommendations for legislative change, and or just anticipating what may be on the docket in a way that we could collectively offer some broad framework for the chair in her role in responding to requests. I know that's hard because there's a lot of moving pieces once they open, but it might allow us a little more time in December, maybe even, for that type of a conversation.
Great, that's a terrific suggestion. The legislative session will get underway in January, and if we were to just communicate with the legislature around any particular issues, November would be the time when we would need to start to think that through. So we'll add that to the agenda. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, in following up on Brad's presentation today, I wonder if at some point, and November is not the time, if we could get an update from the other aspect of Act 173, the implementation of MTSS, and what feedback we have from the field about how that's going, both in the public and the independent school world, because I know that was when I was on the advisory group. While census-based funding was the first topic of conversation, a lot of it was around how to deliver these services through MTSS.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense for the board to take up, particularly since, again, in the Act 173 report, there were some concerns around whether or not the rules were sort of provided sufficient guidance, or if we needed some updates to the EQS and other rules to help support that. So let's get that on the agenda as well and try to do that soon. If there are implications for EQS, then we want to do that sooner rather than later. Other things to keep on our radar screen over the next, if not for November, in the next sort of 1 or 2 meeting cycles. Jennifer and I usually start working on agendas for the next board meeting almost immediately following, this board meeting. So, okay. Then lastly, we have as a board made an effort, and I think we need to continue to do so, to get out to the field and first of all meet in person. It's nice to see everybody in person, but I also think it's important for us to hold our meetings in public spaces around the state as well. And so curious as to the board's thoughts about places that they would like to see the board visit for a meeting, or if there are related presentations from members of the field on topics that are important to all of us. Thoughts on that?
The only thing I might suggest is, as we're considering being local to any space, doing so before the weather, and it's hard to know because I'm not sure what I was listening to earlier here. It was quite the downpour of something that sounded heavier than rain. So I think it's hard to know with our collective weather, but I think we might almost guarantee ourselves that January in person would be a terrible idea, potentially December. So I'd invite us to be thoughtful about travel considerations and weather. And I don't know if November, in the type of meeting we're going to need to have, is the best meeting for that purpose. So I definitely would love
time to start planning out a little further in advance for 2024, where we could be thoughtful and plan out potentially quarterly that we were in person on site somewhere. So if people could just keep in the back of their heads that we're starting to think about that kind of planning, and if you have a suggestion or a preference, email that off to Jennifer and myself, and we will get that into the conversation. So thank you. I'm noticing that we are continuing to be a bit ahead of Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Tammy. I understand Tom has brought up MTSS. I also want to echo that it feels like on the field there are some needs of clarity or clarifying needs. I was wondering if we could invite an expert. I know there are many out there around that topic, just to provide us maybe the availability of potential professional development for folks on the field to reach out to get a better understanding of the topic, because it's new to many and it's not quite different to what there was in the past, honestly speaking, for someone who understands it. But it's just, I find it wonderful to hear it from some expert and provide really maybe some resources out there for our educators for a better understanding of it. Thank you.
We can certainly add that to our list of considerations. Perhaps we could have in one of our meetings in the near term an update from the agency on MTSS, but alongside some background and some more professional development for the board around MTSS, its purposes, what high quality MTSS systems look like, and things along those lines, so that it can help the board think more clearly about its role in developing rules and supporting the agency and implementing Act 173 and also other provisions related to MTSS. So thank you, Mohammed. We'll add that to the list as well.
I think interesting too would be the accountability on it. You can notice there to be a number of tools, but I'm wondering in implementation how we are able to be accountable to that. I can't recall honestly if it shows up in DQS or how it might, but that was a curiosity as you were speaking, Mohammed.
Yep. And to that, I think perhaps rolling into that is an update from the agency on the implementation of DQS, since that is a partner role with EQS. So thank you. I have an update from Jennifer on if any other, let me just check in, any other comments or thoughts on future meeting planning. We certainly can handle this by email as well, but great. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item J. I know we're, again, shaking the snow globe a little bit here and moving around, but I do have an update from Jennifer on Rule 2200, 2200 this time, that I can share with folks, and then perhaps some of the members of the committee can chime in and fill in any other sort of blanks there that they see as necessary. So from Jennifer on the Rule 2200 series, she shares that met with ICAR at its October 9th meeting, and ICAR at that time passed the proposed rule unanimously and provided some suggestions with regard to the concise summary and the economic impact statement, which they subsequently incorporated in the filing with the Secretary of State. And just for record, the ICAR provided similarly helpful comments on EQS. They will be the next step in this, of course, is now this file with Secretary of State's office will be public hearings, and there are 3 scheduled. I think once again, this is a signal to intended as signal to the community at large. You know, we're only required to have 1 public hearing. Again, the board is selected to have 3 in this instance. 1 on Friday, November 17th from 11:30 a.m. to 1. 1 on Tuesday, November 21st from 4 to 5:30 p.m. and another one on Monday, the 27th of November from 6:30 to 8 p.m. So 3 different days in 2 different weeks, all at different times. So board always welcomes written public comment in the event that individuals can't visit those with us at those meetings, and certainly if you are able to attend the meeting, submit public comment as well. And that can be emailed to sbe.publiccomment@vermont.gov, and the public comment period for this rule will now close on December 5th. So that was Jennifer's update. And I just want to reach out to members of the committee. Was there anything else that you wanted to add there? Many thanks to that committee. I know that they've done a lot of work in a very short period of time. All right, we are ahead of schedule. So how about we then put on our ahead of schedule agenda, ahead of schedule break, and take, I think we're scheduled here for a break at 10:45, coming back again at noon. So I think unless I hear otherwise, we can take that break now with the intent of coming back, reconvening at noon. I don't think I have to move. We're not adjourning, so we're just taking a break. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you at noon.
Hey, Lyle. So I think we have a quorum. I've seen Jenna, Lyle, Tom, Tammy, Gray. Mohammed's back. All right.
It is, yeah.
To be perfectly honest, do we need to do a roll call again, or?
No, we didn't adjourn. We just took a break, so I don't think we have to do a roll call.
Great. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. I spoke with Tammy during our break, and sounds like she did a marvelous job of keeping us on track and maybe even ahead of schedule. So thank you, Tammy. I think we are now at agenda item K, which is the agency update on independent school compliance with changes to Rule Series 2200. So I'm not sure if the agency is here with us.
I see Josh is there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I see is Josh too. Me ping the others.
So we
I
might
think
be
I see
weird.
I see Deb Ormsby there too.
Yeah, I'm here, but I know Emily's providing this update, so let me ping her and kind of see where she's at.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're waiting for at least Emily and Heather.
Hi, I'm here. This is Emily.
Hi, Emily.
So this item, the agency's update on the independent school assurances, has a possible executive session indicated. So I'm just waiting to see if the board has a motion for that executive session.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if there was anything that we were doing before then, but if not, without further ado, I move that pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1, that the board finds that premature general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the State Board of Education would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
I think it was seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
I'm sorry, Jen.
Kim has her hand up.
I just have a question. In this context, is Emily our attorney? I'm just trying to clarify. Okay.
No, this was just, so Janie Craybill of the AGO is over in the executive session meeting that was created. So I heard you talk about you needed somebody to appear. So that's why I popped on to let you know.
Okay, so the attorney-client privilege is with Jamie.
Correct.
Okay, sorry. Just trying to understand.
Good question.
Thanks.
And actually, can we just do a show of hands, Emily, or do we need a roll call? If you know.
You need a roll call for any vote that's non-unanimous, and to enter executive session, you need a 2/3 majority.
Okay. I'm just going to take a chance here. All those in favor of approving the motion as written, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Hearing none, are there any abstentions?
Yeah, I got in late, so I'm not sure what the motion was.
Okay. Let me reread it. This is a motion to enter into executive session. So the motion is that I move pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1 that the board finds the premature general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the State Board of Education would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage. So that was my motion. Tom seconded it. So we've done the ayes.
I'll vote in favor of that.
Okay, so I've heard the ayes. There were no nays. Were there any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, it appears that the motion has passed unanimously. I will now move that the board go into executive session to receive confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the board pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1F. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of Gray, yes.
Sorry, I have a question. Since I'm not a voting member, I don't go into executive session, right? But is there, when should I come back at a time?
You can go into executive session. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. The only, you can't vote, but we don't vote in executive session anyway. But I think if you have the time and the inclination, you are definitely able to come into executive session and listen and participate. You are a member of the board, you just can't vote.
Okay, I'm maybe confusing rules then. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, all those in favor of approving the motion as read,
That's
please
fine.
raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Richard, I see your hand is raised. I'm assuming that's an aye and not a
Aye.
question.
Yes, it's an aye.
All right, all those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Okay, the motion has passed unanimously. So with that, we are going to leave this meeting, click out of it, and then there should be a link for the executive session in your email that you can click on, and I will see you all there. Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard? We are now at agenda item L. I'm not hearing anybody. Okay, Mohammed has joined us. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. I believe we have a quorum. Now do one last call for any members of the public who wish to be heard. Either press the hand icon or hit *5 if you're on your phone. Okay, I am not hearing anybody. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by Tom. Is there a second? Seconded by Kim. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, we stand in adjournment. Thank you all for a very productive meeting, and I appreciate again the flexibility.
Thanks.